Hi! Today I want to show you an install of a Dchdmi kit onto a Dreamcast. I want to thank Dan Citrus 3000 PSI very much for giving me the opportunity to do this and sending me a kit so I can do the install. So I really want to thank him for doing that. The kits are not so readily available. They will be coming soon. Also to Belgium. I made an order of a batch of 25 and they should be coming around very soon. So this is the first install we're going to do here, and we'll show you how it's done. So this is a bit of finding out how we can do this, and yeah. We'll start by dismantling the console and then we'll go to the install part. So let's start. Okay, so we see a battery over here. So I think I'm also going to swap out this battery in the final installation, but that's not what I'm going to show here. And also these caps for the power supply. I think I might change them as well as long as I'm here doing this mod, but that's maybe for another video, but I'll be sure to change those also, just to make sure that the console is as good as possible with the Dchdmi install. So that's the power supply bit. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 caps in this one. They don't look leaky, but better to change them because yeah, they've been in use for some time. It's a fairly easy job to do, so while you're in there, I recommend doing this also. CD drive bit. That's the fan. Just take out these. Okay, so that's what we need. The motherboard coming out of the console. All right, so this is the part mainly that we're going to do the soldering of the flex cable. So Dan made a nice flex cable for this install to be fairly easy. So you have to remove a few resistors, and then you can pop the cable into the right position, and then you can make the solder connections. Should be fairly easy to do with enough flux and a fine soldering iron. Okay, so we also have to modify the case a little bit. There is a standoff that Dan gave us for that, so I have to check, but we have to put it somewhere along here and then drill a few holes, do some filing. Yeah, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be rather nice to have this, because when we make the hole, we want it to be as good as possible. And we also have to modify the bottom plate. I believe we have to take out some of the iron sides. Okay, so that was the first part, the disassembly of the Dreamcast console. So okay, we'll go. I think we first thing I'm going to do is make the holes, make the hole, and then cut the board, and then we'll see. Okay. Okay, so what I've done for now is I've removed the two iron tabs on the shell plate here, there and there. I also cut the hole for the board HDMI connector, mini HDMI connector to come out. And I've fitted the board with the two screws, with the positions that Dan recommends. And I also fitted the small antenna for the ESP module. So now what we can do, we can proceed with the motherboard installation of the flex cable. So we'll start by doing that. Okay, so this is the motherboard of the Dreamcast. And what we need is this area over here. So there are two resistors that we need to remove. And then we need to install the flex cable, sort of like this. Make the connections there and here and also there for the cable to be able to tap the signals from the chips. So we'll start by removing the two resistors over here. That should be a fairly easy job, and then we'll tin this capacitor's leg right there so we can make a good solder connection to the flex cable. Okay, so first things first, easiest way to remove these two, I think, is just to use a big soldering iron. Don't put too much of temperature on it, and just fill it with solder. You see, it should come off fairly easy, as you can see. Voila, both of them are gone. So we'll use a bit of wick to remove the excessive solder still on those pads, like that. Should be pretty clean right now. And we have to put a little bit of extra solder onto this leg of the capacitor. So that's what we did. Now, what we need to do, we need to add a fair amount of flux to the big ICs, like this. That's the easiest way to do the install, I think. You need a lot of flux so the solder doesn't make blobs between the joints and is nicely connected. This is, by the way, also similar to the Ultra HDMI install with the flex cable. The pin size is very similar, and I will always check this by my microscope to see if the connections are not bridged and they're any good. So we'll start by putting on the first part of the flex cable. So Okay, it's coming along nicely. And now for the final part of the flex connector to the chips. Okay, so that should be the flex cable part. I'll verify. No. That should be it for the flex cable. Now we have to solder some of these points to the capacitor here, the big capacitor there, and also those 2 points. And then this flex cable is mounted also here. This one also needs to be connected. So we'll add again some flux to these points. Okay. These are a lot bigger pads, so that's much easier to do. That's one, that's two. That's three. And that's the other big part over there. So go in there, and also go in there, like that. And now I'm going to use a bigger soldering iron for the capacitor connection here. It can use a bit more heat in doing this. Like that, that's good. And then we should not forget this last part over there. Like so. So these connections are ready. So we'll clean this up and then I'll make a nice big photograph of this so we can get a close-up right now. So clean it up. there's one connection I want to see under the microscope. That's that there. It's not as shiny as the others, so I'll just add some fresh solder, I think. First we'll see. Connection is made, but I'll touch it up anyway, just for good measures. I want this to be perfect. Okay, I made a bridge. So we'll add some flux and we'll get rid of the bridge. Okay. Alright, the pads are connected. Okay, so what we need to do now is flip the board over, and then we have to look for a series of resistors, the R601, R602, and the IC 206 pin right there. That's the reset pin, and those are the two connections that go to the P1 and the P2 on the board. So I've prepared my little wires a bit, and we'll make the connection. So the P1 and the P2, I will use the two strangled connections here, the blue and the black, and the reset will go to the red one. So for good measures, so we can keep the wires apart. So I'll put some solder on the connections, and then we'll connect the wires. I'm using this very fine solder tin. And here the 206 IC. So we'll put a bit of flux on the ends of the wires, and then the connection should be very easily made. So this one, the red one, as I said, goes to the 206 reset IC. So that's that. And we'll make the black cable go to the 601, like that, and the blue will connect to the 602. So P1 is black, P2 is blue. So that's that. So you can see, if I pull the cable a bit, it doesn't come loose. So we have a good connection. And as Dan suggested, I also put a small heat shrink tube on my wires. So that's nicely done, like this. So I'll shrink the tube a bit. That's the first, and this is the second one. Like that. So it'll keep the wires nicely organized. So I take the shell with the DC HDMI board in there, and then we'll just connect up the wires. We'll cut them to length. We'll say something like this. Looking for my cutters. Oh, they're here. So something like this. Through these wires, and then we'll connect them to the DC HDMI board, like this. Okay, I'm going to melt a bit of the plastic off and then put a bit of tin on there. Oh no, or I just put a bit of flux on there. There's enough tin on the DC HDMI board. So that's that. Now we'll take a bit of flux, like this, on the cables. Okay. So, as we said, the 601 is a black, that's P1. 602 is the blue, that's P2. So, P1 is the black, and P2 is the blue. So, this is the P2 connection, this is the P1 connection, like that, and this is the reset connection. Right there. So if you have a GDEMU board in the Dreamcast, then it's recommended to connect the option pad, which is right there, also to the reset of the GDEMU, and then you have to flick the switch over there on the board. So this console is still fitted with normal drive, so no GDEMU, so we're not going to we cannot connect the pad, obviously. So now we reassemble the board. So the flex cable has to go into the connector. See that there is no dirt on there. So the flex cable goes in and out. So let's try this again. Alright, flex cable is in, and then you just push down the connector door onto the flex cable, so it clicks and then it pushes the connection together. So that's the flex cable connection, and then we just put the board together. We put the console together. Let's check if we don't put in the fan, the fan connector, the fan cable, and here the power cable should go smoothly in there. Like this. So this is how it should look, and we'll continue connecting, building the console, putting all the pieces in there. Just make sure we don't strangle any cables somewhere. I'll check that first. I'm going to move the connecting cables of P1 a bit more to the side here. Okay. So they're not trapped underneath. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, like that, much better. Okay, so this piece goes here. I took off the metal tab as Dan suggested, so it doesn't kill our flex cable right here. So, and this is that. All right. Matter of fact, I'm going to do a bit more. I don't like it being that close to the cable, rubbing the cable, so I take it off completely, so it doesn't touch the flex cable. That's something that's better for me. So I'll just do a quick reassembly just to get the console up and running. I want to see this run as fast as possible, and the reassembly bit is boring, so we'll speed things up a bit. I'm not screwing everything in place, so I can just quickly mount all the pieces in there, and I will fire up the console and see it work. Put that in later. Or not. So the PSU. Yeah. Oh. For good measures, there's a little plastic tab. I'll make sure it's not coming loose. Nice. I'll just put one, just to be sure. Better be safe than sorry. I'll just put 1 or 2 screws in the power supply unit so it doesn't move around and we don't make a connection somewhere, because that would easily kill the system. So this is the drive, goes in there like that. Alright, so we're ready to put the cap on, the top on. Alright, like this. Just temporary. We'll connect the mini HDMI cable to the console on the back. I'll show you. It's turned off like that. Then we need our power cable. Okay, the TV is on HDMI, so we'll power it on, and when everything is okay we should get a signal, and we don't. Okay, so you saw me do the installation of the DC HDMI board in the Dreamcast I have here, but I didn't have a screen on the HDMI out, so I was doing some digging, and it turns out the old firmware didn't support PAL systems. So there is a nifty trick, a nifty possibility, it's not a trick, on the DC HDMI board, and that is there is an ESP module which is connected to the flash memory of the DC HDMI board, and with this ESP you can use a PC to connect to the onboard web page of the ESP module, and then you can connect it to your Wi-Fi. When that's set up, you have the possibility to upgrade the firmware. So that's what I just did. I just upgraded the firmware of the console. I didn't change anything on the connection or anything else. I didn't redo anything. And after a firmware update, then it works. So I'm going to show you that. So I have my mini HDMI port here. I'll take my mini HDMI cable and plug it in like this. I have my power like that. So I just put in a power socket with power on the console. Also put in the controller port. Maybe that was my TV, but now you see the familiar Dreamcast screen. And so when I open it up, I just take the game and then we'll just load it up. So as you can see, after flashing the new firmware on there, everything works as expected and is doing its job nicely. I'm amazed on the quality of the picture. So sharp, so nice. So there you have it, the DC HDMI install on a PAL Dreamcast console. I'd like to thank you for watching to this movie, and please subscribe and give a thumbs up. Thank you. See you next time.